What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and today I want to talk about a very controversial topic that it does feel like some people are afraid to talk about, which is just the concept of video games are getting worse. I do feel like we hear this a lot, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. It does feel like people are just posting everywhere that when it comes to quality, when it comes to big releases or even console exclusives, this has been a strange time. We're getting less games, we're getting less interesting stuff, and for the first time, we've seen an explosion of retro gaming. People going back to the past to play the classic games that kick ass. But I want to talk about this today for a specific reason, which is that I just got back from QuakeCon. Now, this is a huge gaming festival where everybody gets together to play stuff, both old and new, and I've been going pretty often for the last 10 years, and typically there is a big specific game. Normally, when you're in these rooms of people having LAN parties and actually facing off against each other, there's usually a giant game that kind of takes over the industry, whether it's Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate or something like Quake Champions. But this year, almost everybody was playing incredibly old stuff. Retro, remakes, remasters, stuff online, private servers, mods. There was so much just of a focus on classic games that it did feel like I think something has pivoted. But is this a lack of quality, or is it just the fact that, honestly, things have gotten so expensive? Let's discuss. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I must admit, I think part of the reason this keeps happening is that there is so much cool old stuff. We are now in a spot where it is wild that if you have even a halfway decent PC, if you have access to any sort of mod box or something, a media server, you can play a lot of stuff from decades past. And a lot of these games actually still look pretty decent. Games like Fear, which was like a spooky first-person shooter, games like this still look good and play good, and a lot of times they're even getting new versions of classic games. Like this weekend, they shadow launched a new version of Doom 1 and Doom 2, and the version of Doom 2 actually has orchestral music, which is incredibly good, and tons of new levels. This is a completely new Doom level that was just made. And while I was playing that, I almost had this awakening inside myself, because not only is this incredibly freaking fun and honestly kind of mind-blowing how high quality it is, but I kind of reflected on the fact that it doesn't need graphics. I think that a lot of these companies, these big video game publishers, have this weird Hollywood mentality that things have to be of a certain caliber, that if you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a game, it better be as photorealistic as Spider-Man 2, when I almost feel like gamers don't care as much about that visual pop. I think people are starting to get to this era where they just want stuff to be fun. If it happens to be beautiful, if it happens to have some jaw-dropping vistas, that is a nice bonus, but it does feel like we're hitting this point where, if anything, we're kind of missing that surprise of games we used to get. Like PT Demo celebrated its 10th anniversary yesterday, which obviously was going to become Silent Hills. This is a game that's very near and dear to my heart. The idea of Guillermo del Toro and freaking Hideo Kojima coming together to make a horror game is incredibly good. But while I was thinking about this announcement, I feel like this is an example of what we are lacking in current games. Not just surprise, but just weird auteur awesomeness. Stuff that is not afraid to be extremely uncomfortable or weird and kind of just let the audience figure it out. Like, I was playing Limbo yesterday. It's a very old, I originally played it back on Xbox Live, and 2014, I think. I played it shortly after launch. And while playing it, I was kind of just baffled about the fact that the game still looks incredibly good. It still has such a heavy ambience. I still respect the fact that it doesn't even have an opening cutscene. Like, you start the game and you're like this creepy kid going through the woods. The game is good, but I almost feel like you don't get stuff like this anymore. So while I was at QuakeCon, I kept talking to a lot of fans. A huge chunk of subscribers came up to me and were talking to me about the videos and the industry and all sorts of stuff. And I started to just question the idea of video games in 2024 to kind of get their take, a random example sample size of people and their thoughts on it. And somebody proposed a crazy idea. He said, everybody loves retro games now because of the boom of indies. The fact that everybody's making pixel remasters and low budget cool games that are trying to focus on art instead of just raw presentation, people are now acclimated to the idea of older games still being good. Playing a game like Celeste kind of trains you for older good games. Playing a Doom or the Quake remasters prepares you for playing older games in their natural format. And I thought that was an interesting thought. I honestly never considered the fact that the rise of indies actually makes it so that now that we're getting all these remasters, a lot of times games with updated controls and even upscaled assets and stuff like that, I do think that it's not just that games are getting worse. I think it is that people are craving that smaller feel. Like having a 500-hour long Assassin's Creed is cool, and I think people do enjoy that. But I think there is a big demographic of heavy buying consumers that want to play a game that's 6 hours long or 12 hours long or 20 hours long, something you can sit down and beat and enjoy in a single weekend. And then if you want to play through it again on a harder difficulty or try some online modes, it feels accessible without being daunting. But it does feel like the primary talking point I heard a lot is that games launch busted. There have been leaks about a Starfield land vehicle. Apparently it's in the code. I don't want to show too much of this because I'll probably get super canceled or a DMCA. But a lot of people are saying this is suspicious. It seems like this is a feature that was removed from launch for absolutely no reason. Many ships already have ramps, so it seems like vehicles are ready to go. The fact that this already has voice lines and stuff, I think that this is a feature they cut just to make the game feel more big. And I have to admit, the lack of features, the fact that so many games do launch unfinished, I think is a bad sign of the times. Like, even good games, even stuff that does actually blow our minds, like Bravely Default, it does feel like even high-budget current games, I have found myself, like many other people, kind of gravitating towards those things that feel feature complete. Because if I'm paying $60 for a game or $70 for a game, or God forbid I'm buying some $200 special edition of something so I get early access, I think the biggest problem is that it's not just that games launch busted or that games launch with missing features and stuff like that. I think it's just more simple about the fact that I almost feel like there's this disconnect where the studios that are making stuff are just so focused on sales numbers, they're forgetting to make the gameplay loop addictive or to make the game actually an enjoyable, cool experience. They're just worried about keeping the investors happy. I have been thinking about this presentation that happened over at D23, where they announced a ton of sequels. Moana 2, Frozen 3, The Incredibles 3, Toy Story 5. And I'm not even insulting this directly. I'm not saying boo, kids' movies, whatever. I think it's that a lot of the people are kind of saying, man, the creatively bankrupt sequels are just the worst. Is there anything original? Everything is just a franchise these days. And I almost feel like that to me is what sticks in my mind the most, is that I'm glad we get new Final Fantasies. I super love Final Fantasy 16. I've played it and beat the heck out of it. I really love Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, but lately I've been going back and playing the original FF7. Just playing through it just for funsies on my couch, not caring about trophy unlocks or deadlines or every single side quest. I'm just sitting there at the end of every day for about an hour just playing FF7 with a controller in my hand and kind of just enjoying the vibe. And the game is not just good, but I almost feel like older games, in a lot of aspects, I feel like they preserve the nature of creativity. It does feel like a lot of those older games do have an extra essence that current stuff doesn't have. One fan walked up to me and said, I don't pay for video games that much anymore because I'm just into ROM hacks. I just play stuff on my freaking analog pocket. I play a lot of Pokemon hacks, and I thought that was interesting. And I talked to him, and he was basically saying, I am at a point where if I'm paying for a game, it has to be worth the money. But it's also the fact that if I'm just going to pay for a game, it needs to be something that's not just the same thing. It's not just another sequel. It's not just another thing. I almost have it in my brain where games like Ghost of Tsushima, which I think might be one of the best modern games, that game was not just fun. It was super, super, super unique. It felt like a game that was not afraid to do something different. That studio had never really made a game like that before, but it managed to be big and expansive and beautiful and magical. And they made it on such a tiny budget. Same with something like Days Gone. I just feel like Nintendo is in a spot where they do understand the assignment. I think I've got my criticisms of Nintendo, but I still feel like when it comes to them, they are at least trying to keep that charm, to keep some level of preservation to that classic vibe of excitement that used to exist in games. Lately, I've been playing a bunch of Phantasy Star Online. The original, yes. The old school Dreamcast game. It's free now. You could just play it. And at QuakeCon, while I was playing it, I kept having random people just strut up and say, oh my god, I remember Phantasy Star. Oh my god, this was the first online game I ever played. And there was this light in their eyes that I feel like I did not notice with people when they talked about looking at Concord or talking about the latest Fortnite update. Not that those games are bad, but it does feel like there is a joy and excitement that did exist in older games that I feel like just doesn't get reflected today. But I'm still not sure why. Is it that everything is creation by committee? Is the problem that games have gotten so big and so bloated, they're trying to be too safe? Is it just the fact that everything is getting so much the same? I don't really like Star Wars that much, but especially the fact that there's so many Star Wars shows and spin-offs and movies and sequels and prequels, you get exhausted. And I wonder if, in a way, the video game industry is starting to get exhausted for the first time. Because it just doesn't seem possible. Like, in my mind, part of the wildness of this whole circumstance is the fact that you would expect video games to keep getting better. With more developers, more releases, more budget, more focus, more love, more mainstream appeal, I always assumed that video games were going to get better and better and better. Iron sharpens iron. With more people trying to compete for your attention, better games would win out. But instead, it feels like we get a lot of lazy slop, games that don't actually have any sort of true gusto. And it's such a weird problem that I don't know if there is a solution. But I wanted to just do some off-the-cuff thoughts because honestly, there is something that needs to change, but I'm not sure even what. I don't even think it's an effort of more games need to be released. I don't even know if it's more exclusive need to be released. It's more just me kind of reflecting on the fact that it is weird that I would rather be playing old school Doom than pretty much anything else. I do feel like that's kind of a bad sign for the industry if I crave what's old more than I crave what's new. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you could, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. Oh yeah, so somebody did a front flip off the stage. I have to show you this video. It's too funny. This guy did a front flip off the stage at QuakeCon, and yeah, everybody's memeing the hell out of it. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Look, and of course, people filmed it from like 15 minutes. This guy broke his ass. This happened. People filmed it from like 80 different directions, and immediately the entire freaking QuakeCon just could not stop making jokes. It's sad. It's sad, but you can't help but freaking die. There's a clip of him walking back to the audience and being so embarrassed. Look at, oh, I have to. This zoom in is so funny to me. You can tell he's in so much pain. Like, yeah, man, look how sweaty he is. Like, yeah, doing a front flip was not the right move. You know what? Don't do flips. For the rest of the freaking convention, though, anytime anybody was up on stage and won a tournament, everybody in the crowd started chanting, "Do a flip, do a flip." QuakeCon rules. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.